Ketan and Co. Oh, and apologies. So recording has just been made in progress. Just as a disclaimer, I hope everybody is comfortable with that. All right, just getting back to the intros, we have Rohit, who's the Chief Digital Officer at Ketan and Co. Ketan and Co is one of India's leading law firms. Rohit has multitude of experience across various different kind of setups, including legal tech companies like LexisNexis. He's built his own legal tech startup and is now with a law firm. We also have Sumitro Chatterjee, who is the director, Lex Fusion Global Operations. It's now a part of Barrett's and Brunel. Sumitro is a very seasoned legal tech and operations expert. He's also based out of India, has over 15 years of experience across multiple Fortune 500 clients. We have, okay, it's a big panel. So like we have two more people going to go through that very quickly. We also have Saurabh Khan, who's the founding member at Sarvam.ai. Saurabh has had a very interesting journey. Started out as an engineer, was one of the founding members of OpenNyai, which is a AI for justice initiative based out of India. He's currently building a legal AI startup, which was now acquired by Sarvam.ai. And last but not the least, we have Horace Liu. Again, very interesting trajectory. Started as an attorney, originally from Sydney. He's now building Cynthia, which is a legal tech startup, and Horace is based out of New York. He's also an accidental podcaster, as he calls himself. So do check out further comments. Some very interesting work on second and third order effects of technology on the legal profession. Also, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. For this specific panel, we're going to be looking and talking more about what's really happening in the legal profession in terms of AI adoption and automation. Where are areas of improvement? What is happening in the rest of the world? And what really are the lessons for India in that regard? And of course, before that, what we're going to do is do like a quick rapid fire round with all of our panelists. And we're going to ask them, what is the one shift in AI adoption that they think is going to have the most tangible impact on legal profession in the next 12 months? So first, yes, Yasmin, what do you think is going to be the most, what's going to be the one shift that's going to have the most tangible impact?
Shreya, I was thinking about how fast the technology has evolved over the last, 2 years, but also the last 3 months. We're starting to talk to law firms about agentic AI workflows and all sorts of exciting things. But if I were to pick one thing that I think is going to have the biggest impact, it brings me to something which is a lot more boring, which is that I think one of the biggest barriers to adoption in the Indian and actually sort of broader global context is information and data security. And I think that, over the next year, it's something that needs to shift, and it's something that will shift, is law firms looking at both solutions and confidence in information and data security. Some of the solutions are already there, but it requires a sort of different conversation between law firms, clients, tech vendors to really build that confidence and feel comfortable with it. And then it might mean looking at other solutions. We've been talking to law firms about things like small language models, which sit on premises where you really don't have to kind of worry about the information leaving the premises. But I think there's going to be a range of different changes in that area, which will make a really, really big difference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Yasmin. Over to you, Richard. What do you think is going to be the massive shift?
I think the fundamental shift is going to be that lawyers actually start using it, which sounds like a very simple point, but kind of goes to the fundamental problem with most powerful legal tech is that people don't actually use it. There was an enormous amount of innovation by press release over the last few years, and I certainly have been the conduit for some of that. That's for sure. But the reality is that generative AI gets to value so rapidly. People can get something back, even if they're not using it for billable work. They can learn pretty fast, whether it's just like an API to OpenAI, or they've got something with a proper walled garden and they're using Legora or Harvey or whatever. But I think what's changed is I used to talk to in-house lawyers all the time about AI and law, and you just get this glazed look, or you'd get the PR spiel because they wanted to look good, but there was actually really almost nothing happening really. The same with most law firms. It is definitely genuinely different now. So I think for me, well, we can explore this more, but lawyers are actually finally using AI products for real.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that. Over to you, Rohit. What do you think is the one thing that has the most tangible impact?
You know what, actually, I feel that lawyers as a profession is not too open for adopting technology or to the changes. So a lot of times it's kind of an enforced one also. And so from that angle, I see when I sit in a law firm, and what perhaps is going to happen is that, say, Richard, you talked about Uber. So Uber, the law firm, because the entire firm, when they are talking about AI and they're talking about writing codes using AI or reviewing code, so definitely the other functions, the internal law firm functions are forced to start adopting. And from there is where the change for using AI within the law firms and in general with the lawyers would start coming. So I think it's much broader. It's not as a leader, but as a forced follower or forced adopter is what I see is going to happen with the legal profession.
Okay, thank you. Sumitra, what do you think is the one shift in AI adoption?
Right. So one of the things that everyone kind of covered, and I think it's important to understand that we have to treat AI as different in kind and not just degree. And AI is poised to reshape 80% of the corporate legal wallet, for example. So it's important to understand that we should focus on training. One of the most important things that I have realized that once you don't start putting time, which Richard rightly said, you have to kind of give time to it. You have to train from your base level soldiers to the highest level. I think that's a major shift, which I believe, and especially if we focus on, let's say, law departments, they're still poorly positioned to tackle AI. When it comes to their projects, and even though they're unfunded mandates, and there might be they might have different needs which they might haven't still understood, which is fine. The point is that people aren't willing to try, because we have seen so many times that when you see something new, our first reaction is either to reject or to think something new which is coming, which is going to be so great that it's going to change the world. But I think a middle approach to take it step by step is what is going to actually impact adoption for sure.
Got it. Thank you so much, Sumitra. Saurabh, what do you think as a builder is going to be the one shift in AI adoption?
One shift or one factor that will shift adoption?
You can pick either, whichever you think is going to have the most tangible impact.
I mean, it's a hard question, and I mean, the curse of going in the end is that I can just recycle everyone's points, right? Because everyone is correct in that sense, right? So I'm gonna steal Horace's point about education, right? Like I think I think the highest impact would happen, and this is what the thesis was when I was building something, that if you really believe that AI will crunch up all the mundane, right? That basically means that you will have to start giving people much faster, growth pathways in the firms or in their career, right? And that basically means that you will have to train them, and that will be very different nature of like education in some sense. But yeah, I believe like that is going to be the one, and I tag Horace because I see he has already unmuted.
Okay, over to you.
Well, I mean, look, you've taken my point, so I'm going to take the second biggest impact. I think is going to be the maturing of products and the fragmentation of how different products will serve different ends of the markets. So it used to be just a big chatbot, right? You log into OpenAI, you type it in, you go direct interface to frontier model, foundation model. But now the products are maturing, and there's different layers of wrappers around the foundation models, some thick, some thin, some useful, some not useful. And the cost differential is also happening, which means high-end legal professionals are going to get really sophisticated products with inbuilt workflows. Other people might not need that. You might just need a chatbot. So a lot of people who are not lawyers will be able to self-service, and that would also impact the legal profession. So I think the maturing of the market into different tiers of products serving different needs is going to come as a big impact in the next 12 months.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we've heard the fact that the tech is changing very quickly. This is perhaps the first time the lawyers are actually using it. Of course, clients pushing law firms to use it. The fact that education and there'll be second order effects. And also, Horace, like you mentioned, the market maturing. So really in all of this, right, we want to understand more how AI's adoption in India really compares to mature global markets, right? And perhaps from that, try to extrapolate what practical steps Indian organizations and firms can take to bridge these gaps. So first, I'm going to invite Yasmin really. And Yasmin, please do walk us through the recent study you've done to give us a little bit of more context on how India's AI adoption really compares to the rest of the world.
Sure, thanks, Shreya. So I think I'm probably talking about this from two perspectives, and one is our partnership with the Financial Times on the FT Innovative Lawyers Program means that we talk to global law firms as well as leading national law firms across Europe, Asia Pacific, North America. In addition to that, as RSGI, we work in India, and we've run a study of the Indian legal market and its development. We've just published our latest Recite India report, which looks at the top 100 law firms in India and how that market is developing. And over the course of the last year, we found that there are some really fast movers in India. There are firms like Ketan who are doing some really exciting things, but on the whole, Indian law firms and legal departments have been much slower to adopt generative AI than their global peers. We looked at 100 of the top law firms in India over the past year, and as of the end of last year, 26% were using generative AI within the firms. And that includes general tools like Copilot, as well as legal domain specific tools. And there were just a handful. So there were four law firms who developed their own proprietary AI system, which had some sort of significant capability. But if you compare that to the 120 law firms that we surveyed, in Europe, North America, and the rest of Asia Pacific, last year, 75% of those were using generative AI, so 3 times the number. And nearly half were using some sort of legal domain specific tool, which was, most likely to be Harvey, Legora, CoCounsel. And just over a third had built their own in-house proprietary AI system. So the numbers and the proportions are much higher outside of India, but I don't think you've necessarily lost a huge amount of ground. I mean, one of the interesting stats, kind of coming back to the point I made in our quick round session, was that only 1 in 5 of the law firms, of those 75% using generative AI, 1 in 5 overall, actually, not of the 75%, was using AI, generative AI with live client data and on live client matters. And I think that's, until we kind of get to the point where we're really doing high value live legal work routinely through AI or generative AI, I'm talking about generative AI specifically, we're not quite there yet. We're still at the experimentation, figuring out how it works phase. And, I think a lot of the leading law firms that we've spoken to, some of them took out AI licenses very early on, found that the tools weren't good enough, they dropped them, and then they came back to them a year later. So we've actually been through this round of learning. And, if you've missed out on being an early mover, I think now's a really, really good time to be a fast follower, because the tech's really developed quite a lot, and it's a lot more effective. And there are a couple of advantages which I think the Indian legal market has. You've got this very young tech-savvy population, as we were talking about with Sumitra just before the call started. But it's also got slightly smaller law firms who are nimble and agile and fast to adapt. And they're able to make those decisions quickly, in part because a lot of them still have very strong founder leadership teams, which in this case is actually quite useful because it can facilitate really fast decision making, which is one of the things that paralyzes a lot of big firms when they're trying to, really invest to make changes to make the most of AI. So I think you've got a booming legal tech market locally, and a lot of the legal technology companies coming out of India, in the AI space are really exciting. So there is a huge opportunity to kind of catch up that ground really quickly. I think the big challenge is actually going to be bringing clients with you, bringing the sort of Indian clients with you, where there is a little bit more conservatism around AI and how it's going to be used. And so there is going to be a lot of work that needs to be done, across that ecosystem, law firms working with clients, collaborating with the tech companies as well, to get them comfortable, and also to help in-house legal teams use the technology themselves.
Got it. Thank you so much for weighing in on that, Yasmin. So, Rohit, in your experience in getting AI adopted at an Indian law firm, right? Does what Yasmin's statistics sort of show? Do you echo that? Do you want to differentiate on that? What really is the journey like, and what challenges are there on ground in the trenches?
Thank you. So what Yasmin just shared is hard data. That's the data which RSGI do a lot of research, and a lot of what we say also comes from what RSGI shares with it in terms of what's happening internationally and in India, right? So there is no point about not echoing that. But having said that, few points I want to bring up here is, what I want to bring this entire AI thing which has come up in 2022, at least for the general people and lawyers also, is, in early 2000s, in India, there used to be this challenge that the network connectivity was not there because these phone lines were not there. And so because of that, offshoring in the software services industry, a lot of this IT industry which developed was not possible. It was thought in India it's not possible because there is no network connectivity. Then boom came mobile network and Geos and Airtels of the work, and that word and that part is a history now. Nobody talks about that network connectivity thing. Coming about the IT adoption also in a law firm or in general in Indian businesses, there had always been a laggard in terms of adopting, say, business process management softwares, various ERP systems, or, various COTS products which are there in the market, generally in the industry, basically. And perhaps AI in some way is like the mobile network for India, what mobile did for that, because a lot of times when we talk about solutions today, structured data is not there, is not a problem. We have AI and we can make structure of that unstructured information which is there. A lot of challenge which we face in India is not about not having the data, but it's about how do we put our hands around the data which is spread across the organization, across the firm, and how do we make sense of that? And that is where AI is going to bring a difference, right? It's now become much faster for us to get our hands around the data. So these are some of those factors which perhaps are going to be the catalyst for us in terms of being able to get on this AI journey and get to where the international firms are there. Perhaps we will also be able to get that. But you know what, the trick also lies in the use cases. Now, it's easier to say that we have very strong use cases. We have developed these models which give a solution in a very accurate manner. That's one side of that. But that's still just a very practice and a very partner specific. The way Indian law firms work, and any law firm, is a very practice and a partner specific workflows are there. And it's impossible for, okay, not impossible, it's very difficult for an external product to configure use cases or come out with a product which solves all of those use cases. And it's a very unique way of working inside a law firm. So perhaps some of those drivers can come from the business of law management things also. It's not just the law, but how the entire business of law is managed, how the timesheets are managed, how do we do a proposal or a strategy or a BD and some of those activities faster using the data which is available, basically, because these cuts across the organization, and these also somewhere becomes a catalyst for lawyers to start thinking about AI. So that's the direction I think perhaps is where the Indian adoption is going to be on AI.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rohit. Sumitra, you're so uniquely positioned, right? Because you have worked for the past several years in what are essentially international organizations while being based in India. What do you think? Where are we placed? What are you seeing, hearing, and sensing? And where do you think India really fits in?
Right. So it's a very interesting proposition to kind of look at. So one of the things that Horace spoke about of thin wrapper, thick wrapper adoption, where do we really even know what our needs are, right? But before I even go into that discussion of what our law firms or legal departments have an understanding of, one of the initial understanding that I have of this market is that if you look at a mature market like US, for example, there is an ecosystem which is being built. So there are legal technology companies which are getting huge investments, which are helping them to, like, for example, I think that in 2024 itself, there's a $5 billion investment which was made overall in legal tech. My numbers might be right here and there, and but look at Clio and Harvey, who secured a significant amount of investment, and they are now getting into a position where they can enter the market very securely and are able to serve all purposes. So I think India probably lacks that ecosystem. True, that, and two, there is also a cultural difference in India. We I think prioritize relationships and personal touch over tech sometimes. I do think that's also a hurdle. So we'll have to look at from a perspective of a mature market when we say is also because there are there are huge investments over legal technology. So it's not only about law firms or law departments, why aren't they adopting, but how much options do they have. India is also a very price sensitive market. India is a very price sensitive document. It's just not lawyers. And I always like to give this example of VLC player, which is so easy to use. It was such a easy, like, even if you had the worst technology, you could always play on a VLC player. It had nothing to do with legal tech, to be honest, but that's what user, no matter in professional, on their personal lives, that's what they want. They want an easy usage. But how can you make something easy if you have money pumped in? So that's a big. How can you make something cheaper if you have money pumped in, right? If you look at Indian startups now, so let me draw a parallel to Indian startups which are there, and there are many now, as you know, Shreya. They are all losing money, but the reason they're still able to give a great service to all our people is because they have made it very easy for the consumers. What will happen in the future, we don't know. But for adoption, especially, what is needed is money being pumped in to develop an ecosystem here. And of course, then there are details of how to do it. You can integrate small steps. You can integrate, limited AI integration in your daily work so that everyone gets used to it, which is, I think, will be a great start. Cultural change needs to come in, which can come in from the very base level. So I think for any legal department, for any law firm in India, it's very important that we take some time out and make sure that everyone is trained on AI and that becomes part of their appraisal, let's say. Even though big companies have it, but that's not a cultural thing for us. So many of our law firms still do not think that training and development is necessary, right? Forget about AI training and development, but generally training and development that every young lawyers need. We don't have a CLE program, for example, right? Where people are told that if you get these amount of points, it benefits your career. So these are certain things which I think are very, very important for adoption. I think, again, we prioritize billable hours over efficiency. That's another big problem I see. And of course, like I said, investment gaps are a big issue. And I think that's the biggest problem, that we aren't investing on legal tech. We still haven't realized in India, like Rohit spoke about connectivity. So, well, that is a more government thing because TRI was one of the most, forward-looking government organizations that we had. So it was really helpful when it came to mobile technology in India. It's one of the best in the world. Same with UPI. And the reason is because there was a government impact on it. So I do think there needs to be some kind of investment in legal tech to make that ecosystem before we even talk about adoption, because adoption comes from the product. So I think that's very, very important.
Got it. Thank you so much. We're going to shift the gears a little bit, right? Let's suppose where India sits and all the challenges and all the gaps we spoke about. Let's suppose all of them were really done and all law firms and in-house teams were now running AI pilots. What do you think would be the challenges and what other practicalities really get involved in running a successful AI pilot in a law firm and an in-house team? So I'm going to first tag Richard to this question, right? Richard, you've seen these pilot rollouts across the globe. What trends are you seeing? Can you give us some examples where it worked, didn't work, and what lessons could potentially an emerging economy like India could have?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, actually. The two main schools of thought. School one is the sort of more structured view, which is you need to know exactly what you're trying to achieve before you bring in a tech product and start allowing people to use it. Because if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, how do you have KPIs, key performance indicators? How do you know what good looks like, and so forth? That's a valid point. The second argument is you can't measure something, you can't create KPIs if you don't even know what it can do. And although it sounds very smart and logical to say that you've got to have a very clear idea of what you're trying to achieve before you start, the reality is that many, many law firms and in-house legal teams don't know how to use this stuff. They simply need to be allowed to play with it. There's been a kind of two-step thing. So we've seen a lot of people building their own internal sort of chatbot type things, which are effectively just API calls to, ChatGPT 3, whatever, 4, and so on. And they created a sort of secure walled garden. So Denton's did that really, really early on. They got loads of publicity because they were just so early. But really, it's just ChatGPT 3 with a bit of a security layer around it. But that enabled a lot of lawyers, and they said, but to play with it. And they said, I remember talking to Joe Cohen, who helped roll it out, and he was saying it was the biggest, fastest tech rollout in the history of the firm. And Denton's is huge. I mean, it's like several thousand lawyers. So it was just incredible. Did it have any real lasting effects? I don't think it probably did on a sort of material structural level. Did it change billable hours, all of that kind of stuff? No, I don't think it did, but it helped to familiarize the lawyers with what generative AI does, how it works, how to craft a prompt. And those who didn't want to play could just leave it because it wasn't a big investment. And those who did want to get deeper into it, you could start to develop an internal education program. Then you get to sort of much more structured stuff, which came along more recently. So, for example, the Bird and Bird POC, proof of concept, with Legora was a huge project. They literally had several hundred lawyers across the entire firm. Bird and Bird's a big UK-based international law firm with many offices around the world. And they really went for it. And they literally had every single practice group. There were several people in every single practice group, and they had multiple offices. And it was just kind of, right, go off and play with it, see what it can do. How does it help you? And then they sort of drilled down and they sort of structured it as they went. And now they brought it in full time. So I don't think there's any particularly right answer. I think probably a good way to prevent anything from happening is to be overly lawyeristic about it and almost like too controlling, become like a control freak and go like, we have to control everything. We have to know exactly what the outcomes are going to be before we've even used it. And if you do that, you're never going to get anywhere. But you do need, I think another key factor of this is having a good innovation team. I mean, traditional IT teams, their job is to run the technology that has become normal. The internet, the web, the email, all the stuff that 20, 30 years ago was cutting edge, now is just a basic utility. The innovation team's job is to bring in new technology, set up ways of testing it, experimenting it with it, building out valuation systems and so forth. We haven't even gone to accuracy. I mean, that's a whole other debate, right? And then you start to get internal champions, you build education systems, and then you start to roll out and get real value. And we haven't even got, I mean, even that, we're still at baby steps. We still haven't even got into really building it into proper workflows, building it into the billable work. And then finally, the real cherry on the cake is when you actually start to create client value. And there's a very good example recently with Kennedy's, the big insurance law firm, which has rolled out a big AI system internally. And it's completely focused on creating value for the clients. It's not just about shaving off 10% of their own costs so they can like up their pep a little bit. I mean, I should have brought it with me, but there's a slide that I've got when I do talks and showing the like maturity cycle. And I would say that 80-90% of firms are probably at level 1, level 2. So it's very, very early days, but I think the key takeaway is just get in there, play with it. If you overstructure it, you won't get anywhere.
Got it. Thank you so much. Gonna shift the gears now and hand it over to Horace. Horace, you as somebody who's building the tech, right? What are you seeing when you are trying to work with law firms and work with them to actually getting them to use the tech in the way perhaps you want them to use it, or in a way that you're imagining them that they should use it? So yeah, over to you.
Well, I mean, I would love to talk about product design and all of that, but I'm going to park that as a second part of my answer. I think as a first part to my answer, I'm going to start off by saying there are 3 different types of AI adopters, and it's determined by the underlying motivation. Are they adopting AI because they want to have a press release? Are they just a marketer? Is it innovation by press release? If so, then the answer is easy. You've just paid $3 million for a piece of software and you're done. Your job is done. There's no adoption needed. If you're adopting AI because you want to feel good, you want your lawyers to go, yeah, I like coming into work. I can chat to a thing. It gives me a first draft that I have to completely revise anyway. That's a slightly different thing, right? And again, you're happy if the AI just gives you a sort of in the ballpark response. It doesn't actually have to give you any return on investment or any efficiencies. And then there's a third camp of people who actually want the AI to make impact on work. And as Richard was saying, if this is something that has to shave off costs or has to make a real impact on client value, that's a very different adoption journey. So depending on who the buyer of the AI is, the seller of the AI just has to hit one of those 3 targets. Therefore, some are easier sales than other sales. If you really want to make an impact for adoption, then you have to design a product that really fits into the workflow of the users and that really delivers an output that's going to be useful. So that's the hardest one. That's the one where you need to spend time talking to your users, understanding everything. And to talk about thick wrappers and thin wrappers, that's a very, very thick wrapper. It's not enough for a chatbot to give you a response that you can go copy into Word and re-edit for the next 5 hours. It has to give you something that is almost nearly there that you can just flick into an email. And that layer of work means you have to partner with a law firm. You have to really understand the lawyers. You have to really understand the outputs. So Bird and Layer is a really good example of this, where they really got to partner together. And a lot of firms who do internal development, their internal developers and engineers really have to understand how their teams work and what the lawyers are looking for. So in terms of AI adoption, the way we think about it is we partner with a dev partner. There's a law firm that we work with to create a product, and only once do we refine it, then we start rolling it out with other law firms. That's how we think about it, and that's how we think AI adoption has to be, same as any tech adoption.
Got it. Thank you so much, Horace. I'm just gonna hand this over to Sumitro, and I'm wondering, Sumitro, because you're also working as part of Lex Fusion on a lot of implementations, what good practical strategies are you seeing that are most effective when such AI implementations are happening at law firms or at in-house legal departments?
Right. So before I kind of go into actual examples, and I thought about this, I actually wrote some of the things down because I thought this was a good way of kind of looking at what people are doing and how expectations and reality are kind of different. So I think there is of course, procurement complexity, right? So for example, a user wants to get in some technology, they want it now, but your IT and your procurement team actually takes lot of time to kind of get that technology implemented, and then there is fatigue which sets in. It becomes a mess because none of the expectations are set. So that's one of the biggest, biggest problems I have seen. So to give you a practical example, like the clients that we kind of try to accelerate the tech with them, we have realized that sales cycles are long. And why are they long? The reason is because expectations aren't met. Some person might have a problem today and is only thinking about that problem today to get solved right now. But technology, because we haven't reached a plug and play solution, there is going to be organized, especially for enterprise solutions, there is going to be a lag. So what we need to be get solved today, get solved maybe tomorrow or even day after. That brings a big gap. So that's a big issue. Then there is, of course, compliance, data security issues, which is a big problem, because, of course, people who are talking about getting a solution, people who are selling the solutions, they are mostly not always looking for, uh, on all kind of compliances, right? Of course, and then teams can get involved, and that creates a major issue. And then the last thing, the third point, which I think is how the business model is misaligned. So in-house teams have budget constraints. The user might want something quickly, but they don't have the budgets for it. These are the three things that I have seen. In this panel, there are many more examples that they might have, but this is something which I thought might be will be of use. And one of the things which I thought was a great example was to do a user acceptance testing. So there is this global biopharmaceutical company called Alchemers, and their only contract lifecycle management, which is CLM, was through email. And it's a huge company. Imagine using, and this is, I'm talking about 2018-19, right? And one of the problems that they were dependent on people, and this is multinational company, and then they try to they realized that they are facing all these issues, and they went for Agiloft. So one of the things that they did and why they were successful was because they were very clear that they have to get on board with everyone. So they did a user acceptance test with the business, legal, finance, and any user group that was open to the technology, which really made the process very smooth. So from being email their prominent contract workflow, all of that shifted to a one platform, and which can be traced. You didn't have to really you didn't have to like run after people. Leaves were an issue. It came to that. So that's one of the great examples of, I think, where a big organization facing problems using a very I'm sorry, I'm not going to say email is medieval, but it just came out, Freudian slip, I guess. But like using from emails to like literally getting into it was an easy solution, to be honest. If you think about it, what was the problem? It was just that you have to get everyone on board. So people are always an issue. So it all boils down to how you get everyone together. Quickly, again, same thing with Clifford Chance and Kira, right? Clifford Chance is a huge law firm. They wanted to speed up due diligence. Kira is a wonderful solution. They had a very clear pilot with a clear business case. They got lawyers involved from day one. They gradually scaled. All of those make a difference. So I think, sorry, I hope I'm not over time, but like I'm very passionate about this. The reason is because we face this on a daily basis.
Of course. Thank you so much. And I didn't feel like a Freudian slip at all. Like there is now a traditional AI because of Gen AI, right? And that technology is like not very old at all. All right. So just picking up on the points, right, where we are seeing, okay, what really tend to be the concerns when you're doing this AI rollout at a firm? And of course, there are some compliance concerns, some security concerns, budget concerns, etc., etc. What seem to be the most pressing concerns that you're hearing and seeing, and how can law firms, corporate legal departments mitigate these risks in a with smart frameworks. So I'm just going to quickly tag Saurabh, right? Saurabh, what do you think are the top risks of this technology that users in these organizations should be aware of? And what can they do to mitigate this in a more effective way or take decisions when they're taking up this risk?
Yeah. So there are risks which are within control, and there are risks that is in the hands of higher powers, so to say, right? I mean, obviously, like data security and data privacy is probably the top risk that law firms have, including to a point where within law firms itself, you might not have access to some data which exists, right? But by and large, now there are almost like two models where you are either hosting on cloud or you are on-prem, right? And I think security standards are fairly well laid out in terms of securing the data privacy concern, right? I think the top concern is mismanaged expectation, right? Like just because two things are two chatbots doesn't mean that they produce the same stuff, right? And usually what I have at least observed and seen is that um, uh, while lawyers have a lot of appetite for technical content, they don't really go deep into understanding how does the product serve them well. And that's why, there's a difference between a search engine, a RAG sort of a system, a chat layer on top of an LLM, or having a model trained on, jurisdictional data, right? Like these three things work very, very differently, right? So one has to be very demanding, but also needs to understand these things deeply enough so that there is no mismatched expectations in some sense, right? Like if you're going to ask an LLM for a citation for a case, it is bound to make it up. A RAG would have like a significant lower component of hallucination in some sense, right? So these are still fairly within control. You could educate, you could make your systems very, very compliant, very, very robust, etc., etc. And then comes the problem of geopolitics, right? So AI has also become a geopolitical issue, and now suddenly you will have to start thinking. So let's take example of a large language model which is trained by some parties, right? Because the training data is within their control, right? You might find very different responses from these models for a particular legal interpretation or any other task that you might do, right? Now this brings back to a question, right? Like, are you going to rely on a sovereign model? Are you going to rely on something which is built by another country, etc., etc.? Unfortunately, law firms are not building their own large language models, right? So this completely falls outside their concern. It falls within their outside their control area in some sense. That is a very, very important question to ask, right? Bunch of things are going to improve, and right now what we're talking about, I think the framing is almost that there is a large language model that exists, and then just the product needs to be built powered by this large language model, right? I think fundamentally, even if we look at the architecture, a lot of things are changing within the models themselves, their capability to reason, and hence their capability to learn from the work produced within a law firm for past n number of years and encapsulating that reasoning, right? That becomes a very, very important strategic goals for any firm who wants to sort of like focus on like client delivery or like high value work, right? But again, you will have all of these challenges, and because you will not have enough investment, because frankly, like building LLMs are not very, very cheap, right? And that's why these are some of the concerns that we have. We specifically, if you're operating outside US, right, the cost will become a concern. Also, the availability of GPUs will become a concern, right? So because you have like one factory which is building chips for the world, and then you have like another company which is building all the GPUs in the world, right? The moment and that entity is governed by the US laws, right? So the moment US puts a trade sanction or something of that sort, you again suddenly are at a risk of losing access to certain models is still not the biggest concern, because now you have like France, you have other countries, we have started building our own foundation model in India. So you will have those things, but now you need serving infrastructure. And if you do not have sufficient GPUs, you won't be able to serve very, very efficiently. So architectures will take care of the cost, but you still have the component around GPU, you still have the component around which actor is training the model, which is outside the control of the law firms. Security, training, and really not shying away from understanding how LLM systems work is within the control of law firms. And these are the risk areas from my perspective.
Got it. So lawyers definitely need to understand how the tech works while they also track what's happening in the United States. Got it. Awesome. Horace, what do you think are the top sort of risk areas that lawyers must be aware of while using this tech?
Yeah, I'm going to bring it back to the perspective of law firms themselves and the things I often hear from law firms. So the primary thing they always ask about is security and data breach. They're concerned that if you're using a language model, it's going to somehow leak the data elsewhere. I mean, the foundation models don't really do that. It's the infrastructure and engineering around it that poses that risk. But I think there's a bit of misinformation and misunderstanding of like, what do these language models actually do and how does the data work and where does it go? Beyond that, I think there's two risks that are inherent in using language models, which are really, really difficult to address. And I don't think they're going to be addressed in the short term. The first is hallucinations and the inherent variability of answers. Like language models, every word is a prediction. And so people kind of go, oh, what's the risk of hallucinating? And my answer is always, every word it generates is a hallucination. It just sometimes gets it right. So I think that's a risk that lawyers have to deal with as a profession who has to be technical and accurate. The other risk that I think about is indirect prompt injection. And that's kind of badly managed prompting, system prompts, histories, etc. So if you don't have full transparency, and if a lot of law firms don't actually have full transparency into how these products work, and you can't see what every single word of a prompt is, including the system prompt, including anything cached, including anything that's kind of put into every single answer, the risk is there's something in there which influenced the answer, and now you get a response that you're going to use, but actually it's based on the wrong information. So these injections can happen really, really easily. And I think that's the other risk law firms have. I mean, unless they're building their own, how are you going to control that? So more kind of actual product facing risks, I think, are the ones I'm concerned about.
Got it. Thank you so much for that, Horace and Saurabh. I'm going to now request Rohit to tell us how law firms are actually assessing all of these risks, right? We've known about a couple of risks for a very long time. And we've also spoken about risks that are perhaps not in our control. But how are law firms really assessing this entire gamut of risk? And how are they sort of making decisions to then utilize this technology?
So one of the big risks which we are having right now is when the president of the US and the Indian Prime Minister are talking about AI, so everyone wants to use AI. That's a challenge which we as a professional innovation people are facing now, because people just want to use AI. And what Horace, you talked about, that it's not a system, it's a human which is giving you answer, and you just cannot get exact same answer every time you're asking for. So these are the challenges which definitely are coming to us. And the thing is that lawyers are not aware of these. And then we have this whole spectrum of lawyers. There are some people whom you just give the tool and they, so by the way, Khitan has our own in-house developed AI tool called Khitan's AI. So that is, it's got widgets and got various use cases and all. And we give it to the lawyers and they just start running with that. And they say it's saving me hours every day, that kind of a thing. And then there are other set of people who have no clue about what this is, how to use it. They ask their team members to not use it, and they find all sort of problem is that. So that these are the two spectrum of people, and everything in between is what we have, the lawyers basically. Now, in a law firm, we have to talk about other things also. It's not just a data security thing. It's also about how we are really segregating the data, how we are making sure that the ethical wall is maintained when the users are using it. It's not like we feed all the data or all the practice data and the tool can be used by everyone. We have to have those ethical walls in place. We have to have trainings in place in terms of what to expect, what not to expect kind of a thing also. We have to have lawyers being enabled to have an intelligent conversation with the clients also. If a client asks, are you using AI model? Are you going to use my data for that or not? If my data is used, have you done the redaction or not? Or to what extent the data is used? So they should be able to have that intelligent conversation with the clients also. The conversations around the pricing model also, that if AI is used and why am I not getting the benefit of that pricing, which you are getting the efficiency. So some of that should get passed to them also. So those are the other things which in a law firm, we keep discussing a lot about these things. Things which Saurabh mentioned about the geopolitics things, because uh, it's like TikTok got banned in India, right? So something similar, like we may be using a model and a couple of months later, Indian government decides that this model cannot be used. We are only supposed to use the Indian model. Then how do we tackle those kind of situations? How the data residency things are handled in a quick manner? How are we prepared for some of those aspects? These are the things which top of the head. A lot of times lawyers are really not thinking about, they are more thinking about the hallucination. Am I getting the right answer or not, and stuff like that. But there are larger level things which in a law firm, yes, are the answers which we need. And the thing is, the underlying technology is changing every day. Every week we have new models coming. Every week they are getting better. Every week they are doing more things. Something which was available in a product is now there directly in a model is directly available. So how do we keep track of that? Early technology adoption risks are there. Those are the things which we keep talking about in a law firm and trying to, align our strategy around that.
Got it. Thank you so much, Rohit,
Mm.
for weighing in on this. We're gonna ask a question that's slightly different now and not so centered around law firms. We want to learn more about what effective AI implementation strategies are being used by global organizations that perhaps Indian corporate legal departments can also adopt. And this is a different question because the levers of change to adopt are very different in a law firm as compared to a corporate legal department. So first, Yasmin, I'd love to pick your brain, right? Again, you have a lot of data. You're also speaking to these people firsthand. What are you seeing in this entire space? And it'll also be helpful if you could help us understand a little bit initially what those levers are that tend to be different between a law firm adopting AI and a corporate legal department adopting AI.
Sure. Thanks, Shreya. So, I mean, I think what's really interesting for corporate legal departments is, and what's interesting about this technology, generative AI, is it's very different to the last wave of legal AI that we saw, the Kira Luminance type tools which helped law firms do M&A due diligence in a more effective way, or the e-discovery tools, which kind of changed how that practice is run. Because this is a technology that the whole business is looking at how it uses. So it's not the legal department trying to argue for attention and budget for a tool which is just going to, shave some time off legal operational costs. And those legal teams that are, corporate legal departments who are moving really far ahead and moving quickly, I think the difference is they're not looking at just where they can save, 5% of time here or there. They've actually got a mandate from the business to do it, or they've got some sort of burning platform to really need to move fast on this. And there are many big companies who have moved very, very far ahead in their use of Gen AI, and in some ways further than law firms have, because they have access to bigger resources within the corporation. Legal departments are smaller than most law firms, but actually in this case, because they can tap into the IT resources strategy budget of the bigger corporation, they, in some cases, are actually doing really well. I'll share with you one case study, but Unilever, their legal team, which is quite a big legal team of 450 or so people, but they won our FT Innovative Lawyers Award in Europe last year for the work that they've done to transform their function and make it really AI ready, and to be very, very fast in adopting the tools. And they had a mandate because they had a company-wide strategy to grow, to improve the way that they were operating. And in response, their chief legal officer, a woman called Maria Barcelona, she came in a few years ago. She set up what they've called powerhouses, so these sort of centers of excellence, one in Bangalore, one in Mexico City, one in Barcelona. And they're staffed with young lawyers, with data scientists, with technologists. And when generative AI came along, they were ready. They had the operating model and the structure ready to bring that technology in. They bought Copilot licenses for everybody. They went with Co-Counsel and got licenses for the whole legal team. And those powerhouses just had the right mix of people, skills, process to use the AI really effectively. And so within the first year, they were sort of shaving 60 minutes off everybody's day in terms of time saved using really kind of pretty general AI efficiency tools, using Copilot to draft emails, communications, memos into the business. And they were starting to use the legal AI really effectively to, cut time out of contracting. So, there are a lot of contracts which they measured being able to do in half the time with AI than the year before. So, I think they had a real success because they had the mandate, they had the need, and the legal team became one of the best users of AI within the business alongside the R&D team, which is just kind of, I know it's probably the first time we've ever heard of a legal team being at the forefront of adopting and using a new technology. But part of it was because they had this sort of structure set up to support it. And I think the lesson from that is it's a very big team, and it probably is not something that every legal department can do. But I think the lesson that is really transferable for other corporate legal departments and for law firms is, there are a couple of different approaches that that you can take in terms of kind of getting the most out of AI and promoting adoption. And one is you do need to go a little bit broad. So give everybody a license, get them to play around with it, let them get familiar with using AI so that they're building a bit of muscle, a bit of openness to change for the next thing that comes along. But actually, if you want to start to really create benefits, you also have to go deep in some areas. So give everybody the tools in their hands, get them to use it, train them, make sure they're comfortable, but find a few very specific use cases and put the right people in place to use it. Because what happens is you roll out an AI technology to everybody, it sits on the side of the desk. It's really hard to change the way you work. It's really hard to learn new things when you're used to being, an expert and top of your tree in your practice. So actually tasking the right people, dedicated resources to using the tech, to implementing it, to finding the use cases in very, very kind of specific areas, I think is really effective. And within law firms, it might be that you have your legal tech team, which is a mix of, legal experts, technologists, innovation, knowledge experts within the team. And within a corporate legal department, it's the legal operations teams a lot of the time if you don't have a whole sort of center of excellence somewhere. But it's not the kind of thing that happens if it's on the side of somebody's desk. And so I think, for everybody, making sure there is that dedicated resource and you've got the right people and the right structures to use the AI makes all the difference.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Yasmin. Saurabh, I'm interested to hear from you, right, in your experience of having interacted with multiple different kinds of Indian organizations. What are you seeing and hearing when Indian organizations and Indian corporate legal departments, perhaps not from a multinational, how are they responding? What are their strategies? What are they doing differently?
So you have almost two archetypes of people. One are digital native companies, right? So these are companies who have like data scientists, engineers, their entire backbone is engineering, right? So some of these people have basically tasked themselves that, how hard can it be to, streamline your contracts, right? They have really started, tinkering around that. So one base strategy that I think a lot of people, so while you have a lot of laggers, there are a lot of people who are adopting. And I think one of the base strategies is just procure and try out in a very, very small team, right? So instead of going wide, getting everyone a license, people are basically doing that. And they are trying to stitch together their own workflows by using multiple products or tools together in some sense, right? A lot of like law firms, a lot of in-houses. And let me actually give you an example of regulatory teams, like which is something that we focused on quite a bit, right? Generally, what I have at least seen is that it comes down to again the procurement and all of those things, right? Like it's kind of interesting, right? Like the person who is doing the work. And here I'm not talking about like a chatbot who can, draft your emails. I'm talking about like something that can, flip out your petitions for a particular regulator in some sense, right? So these are like deep areas of work, but the person who is actually doing the work and the person who's procuring the solution are very, very different people. And because now you have to procure, you have to abide by certain rules. So now what you have is a common minimum standards for a lot of like proposed solutions in some sense. And they don't necessarily answer the requirements of the the real users in some sense, right? So there are all of these different challenges. However, organizations in India who have adopted it very, very widely, they have not gone the deep route, but more wide route is what I have at least seen, where you again like try to shave off like 10% of the time that they are going on doing the work. But there are very few examples that I have seen where someone has like really gone deep into one area of work and really solved for that. And I think that stems from just the way organizations are building, what they are able to build, where's the technology maturity is, and how the organizations are procuring. So yes, these are some of the things that I am seeing from my perspective.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I have one last very quick question, and you can pick who you want to give this advice to, right? Either a law firm or an in-house legal department or legal ops professionals, or actually we also have a lot of legal tech consultants and CEO co-founders. So please feel free to give them that one piece of advice. What is that one piece of advice? What one step they should take in the next 12 to 18 months to stay competitive with AI? All right. So yeah, and we'll do it slightly quickly because we also have a bunch of questions in the chat. All right. Yasmin, we'll start with you.
I'll be
And
really
please,
quick. I think
let
that
us also know who you're sort of giving this advice to. That'll be helpful.
I think to legal departments and to law firms, I think the real key is having the right people in place. And I think you need to have at a law firm a strategic tech leader. And the big law firms in India have those in place now. Somebody in a C-suite, a CTO, CIO, a Rohit, or a chief digital officer who actually has a strategic ability to assess the technology, set that kind of strategy. A lot of law firms don't have that yet. They have an IT director who's still in a maintenance role, and you need to have that sort of strategic insight to do it. You also need to have the right people to use the technology and to play with it. I think it's kind of going back to that point. If you just give it to the partners and the associates, you might get lucky, but you might also need to make sure you've got people who are those right bridges between tech and data and legal expertise, who are going to be able to translate what's needed, who are going to be able to look for great use cases and applications. And then within legal departments, it is those operations professionals who I think are becoming more and more important. And I would say hire somebody. If you don't have somebody in one of those positions right now, hire them. Find the budget, because it will pay itself back very quickly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sumitra, what's your one piece of advice and who is it for?
Right. So I think about legal ops in-house people, I would say get your data in order. Audit your data, audit your workflows, make sure they're in, because no matter how much tech you get, if you don't have data in place, the AI is not magic. That's something which everyone needs to realize. It works with your systems. Your systems are in order. Everything is done. Second, do it now. I think that's the biggest thing that is important for law firms, for legal ops, for in-house. Do it now. The time is now to do it. So yeah.
Thank you. Rohit, what's your one piece of advice? Sorry, Rohit, I think you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. I was thinking whether it is going to be startup or to the lawyers. I'd perhaps talk about the lawyers. And see, lawyers are traditionally, and that's their profession also, is risk averse. Their job is identifying risk in a contract which is going to get signed. And perhaps this is a technology where they have to somewhere let loose and start using. So, in a startup world, we talk about MVP kind of a product, like a product is there, it keeps getting perfected while the users are using it. with lawyers, it doesn't work that way. It's just like they need a perfect thing and then only they want to use it. This technology is not going to be perfect in next couple of years. It is going to evolve, and that's pretty much for most of the tech, but this is much more fast evolving, and they have to get used to that in terms of evaluating the tech, in terms of using it and modifying their way of working, because as Sumitro said, if it is now, it's going to be too late for them to adopt to a new technology, basically. And one of the challenges that the senior partners, they're not going to get impacted. It's the partners who are the junior partners and junior lawyers. If they don't get they are not adopting it, then perhaps they might get out of the market also, and that's what they have to adopt, start using it.
Thank you so much, Rohit. Saurabh, what's your one piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, other than like getting your data ready for AI to use, I would say most organizations, including law firms and in-houses, have to really focus on what is the strategic direction or what is bringing them the strategic value. So while lawyers might want perfect things, right? Like I would say, like we will have to build risk appetite. The systems are improving much faster. I don't think any lawyer could have predicted that 2 years down the line, this is where we are going to be. And that's why this rate of exponential improvement is something that's not going to stop. So rather than betting on how can I take the current set of technology and how do I improve my current flows, I think a better way to think about it would be, what is the trend that I'm seeing? How are these things improving? And tracing back from there, what are the things that I need to sort of like, there's a lot of like process baggages that a lot of organizations have, and it's good time to shed off that process baggage and reimagine some of these things. Things will take time, but as we can see, the rate of improvement on these systems are actually very, very fast. So you might actually hit the sweet spot where the adoption has happened to bring the right strategic value 1 year down the line, 1.5 year down the line. But I think organizations will have to really see like what really brings them both joy and strategic value in some sense.
Okay, thank you. Horace, over to you. What is one immediate step and who are you giving this advice to?
So I was going to say training, but I'm going to scratch that and give a different piece of advice, which is, I think, going to apply to everybody. And that is, if you don't belong in the I'm adopting because of marketing, I'm adopting because it feels good, but you actually want ROI, then for everybody, start from the actual problem people want to solve. What's actually causing people headaches? If you identify that, that's where you start. So go and find a problem to solve.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, once again for doing this. We're just going to quickly look through, and please bear with me because I'm literally reading the questions as we go. And please feel free to volunteer in case you want to respond to something. This is slightly more India specific. So perhaps Saurabh, Rohit, or Sumitro can respond. Do any practicing lawyers actually use one of the any of the GPTs for research or any AI tools? Are you hearing, sensing something? Are you seeing lawyers use it?
Like, do they use the internet to research things? Is that
No,
what? Sorry, what's the question?
more like an Gen AI powered legal research tool beyond your conventional SECs and Manupatras.
I'm sure they do for their first level of research, but the thing with all law firms and at least I can tell you, like, and it's across the globe, I'm sure. The person who's senior most would always want it to be verified by you through different sources, which is the right way of doing it right now. So I'm sure they're using it for quick answers. But it's again, any kind of Gen AI tech that you have is based on the data which is already fed into it. So whatever you feed into it, whatever has been fed into it till now, if it's important and it has, if it's verified, then it's great and it helps you in your research, but can't be your only source, I guess.
Got it. Okay,
We
awesome.
know we have these cases of,
Yeah.
the famous case of getting bad citations, So yeah.
Actually, just to add to that, for legal research, if we have talked about case law research and all, definitely a lot of those head notes are perhaps becoming history with Gen AI when you have the case law. This task of identifying the risk issues, reasoning, arguments of both the side, and all of those things which used to take time now is a breeze when you have a case law already in place. So it's not a research, but definitely these are the things which get you to the case law which you are looking for basically. So that way definitely people are using it. I have seen in Ketan people are using that.
I
Saurabh,
would say
you
like
have.
people, yeah, people are using it. People are also using it secretly, right? This is the same thing that happened with ChatGPT, where law firms said don't use it. Lawyers still went, and because it really solved some of their problem, they did it. I am not just. I'm very confident that they are using it because a lot of lawyers use our platform for doing legal research. And so the short answer to this question is yes. Lawyers are also doing it very discreetly so that people don't point fingers at their research just because you have used a Gen AI, it'll be bad. That's the current perception that they are sort of navigating.
But I quickly want to add that there is a difference between sort of your tech and what is available publicly, like a generic technology or AI. Are they using that or are using your technology? Of course, are they using Westlaw or are you using SEC Online, for example, in India? That is a more it is a source that is accepted in the courts, but are they using something generic? I think that's a distinction that we should make.
I can actually add to that, but essentially anyone who has large case law database, which in India is now very easy to scrape off the internet, can go ahead and build a legal search engine. And you can submit the true copies that you got from the court. So the IP that all of these companies built over a period of time, where they actually own the IP of formatting, that is the only differentiator. And then it levels up because now you are operating on the same data. So you are right that the technology that we are talking about, if you build a very, very high quality RAG system that can eliminate a lot of these issues, or at least like inform the user that I'm not very, very confident. If I have given you a certain answer, that solves the problem. But I think the question, I would actually draw a line between using a large language model for legal research versus using a case law database driven retrieval augmented generation system for that, right? And the answer to the question is actually yes, lawyers are using both of them. And that actually tells you that lawyers don't know how to distinguish one system from the other.
There's a follow-up on particularly this aspect. How is AI adoption in this legal research space changing the relationship between empirical research and traditional legal interpretation? Any thoughts on that?
I just think people have, how much I know, and you need to get an actual practicing lawyer to give you a better answer for this, but I do think across the world research has gone down, which is a very bad thing. That's my general understanding after talking to judges and like what I see. But again, you really need someone who's more involved in the field to answer that question.
Yeah.
Fair.
I think, I mean, a useful analogy might be what happened with e-discovery technology and technology-assisted review, where there was a time where actually there was a bit of grey area about where it could be used, what should happen, and it just had to be tested in the courts bit by bit until we kind of came up with a much kind of clearer understanding of how the tech should be used and where it shouldn't be used.
Got it. Thank you so much. All right, so this is more about business models. And of course, most business models tend to be billing or they are AFAs. And of course, the fact that Gen AI creates efficiency creates a sort of friction, right? This is, again, more specific to India. How much of an issue this is at this point of stage? I'll just request Saurabh and Rohit and Sumitra to sort of respond to that.
Sorry, Sumitra, do you
How
want to go?
much? Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't get the question.
So
Yeah.
how much of an issue billable hour and billable model is as for the as an issue when adopting Gen AI that in fact creates
Yeah.
efficiency?
Okay. Yeah, I got that. So, I spoke about it earlier as well, and I do think, especially in India, billable hours is a model which we have adopted quite quickly, and it really does impact your thinking, because you start thinking about efficiency in the wrong way. I'm not saying that's the truth, but you start thinking that, oh, you'll bill the client less because, uh, you know, now that you have adopted technology, the amount of man hours you used to put in and number of billable hours you would put in, would reduce. But I actually think it's the opposite, right? More fuel efficiency in cars, you have more cars on the road. So it does impact the business, I think, their thinking, especially, but I don't think that's the truth though.
Yeah. I think by and large, in future, most of the expertise that we call expertise today is going to be virtually free, right? At least in terms of access to that expertise, right? And so the question around billable hours really comes down to pricing for value. And now you can't do that in legal, right? Like you really do not have a model around it, right? A better engine should be paid more, right? Like if you're buying a car or something of that sort, right? But there's another flip side of it, right? So if you look at how the technology has evolved, and I'll take ChatGPT's example, right? You pay like some 2,400 rupees or like $20 per hour, and that gets you access, and then you are getting instant answers. But the moment you want to do anything deep, right, where you would use a better model like a O1 or an O3, or if you want to do deep research, there is a time factor that comes there as well. A deep research module is actually going to take some bit of time, right? So you are actually consuming a lot more information. So I don't really know exactly where it is going to land to, whether the billable hours will completely go away, whether you will now add a GPT cost in the billing for the client. But there's no clear pathway to that. But I can say one thing confidently: all the low value tasks, and when I say low value tasks, you know what I'm talking about, right? And it'll have to, the cost to do that paperwork is going to come down, but the ability for you to do more strategic work, the cost for that is probably going to skyrocket.
Thanks. Yes, do you have any data, or did something like this come up in one of the interviews? Would you like to share?
It's an ongoing conversation, and it has been for many years. Had a roundtable with some general counsel in London today where we talked about exactly this. And I think, I don't think anybody has a clear solution. I think there has been a move away from billable hours and a lot of different very specific types of work. We look at RFP platforms, which have their place in the market, alternative fee arrangements, fixed pricing. All of that requires gathering a lot of data to benchmark. So if you're going to do fixed pricing models, you need to know what something should cost and how to sort of predict that in a much more effective way. But I think one of the things that it always comes down to is, what do we value and what are we paying for? So we're not paying for input hours. I mean, we are, but ideally we wouldn't just be paying for input hours. We're also paying for access to a technology. We may be paying for access to a law firm's proprietary tech that's been trained with its data, or that's using my data as a client, which is particularly valuable to me. So there are all of these different factors which are going to have to come into a much more sophisticated way of understanding what we value. And sometimes it's going to be that we're happy to pay more to use technology with people because we care about doing something faster, and speed is worth more. So we might pay more to do something in 5 hours than we would have paid to do it in 20 hours. So there are all of these kind of interesting trends which we might start to see, or we may pay to use human hours plus technology because we just care about accuracy and quality. And for a particular type of work, that's more important. So, it's really thinking, what do we value for different types of work and what are the right models for that? And it's going to be a whole range of different solutions, I think, and hourly rates will still be in there in the mix.
Absolutely last ping, because we've definitely crossed over the hour. Horace, what are you seeing in the rest of the world, right? And particularly in North America around this conversation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The law firms are getting, the market can be separated into a couple of different tiers, and it's a highly fragmented market. So it's hard to generalize, but I would say in the big law market, there are people who have adopted tech but not really using it. There are people who are trying to adopt tech. There are people who are sitting back and watching. In the mid-law market, I think that's where Gen AI can really be of a massive benefit, of mid-law and smaller. But I think the price point is not yet at that level where the mid-law can benefit from it yet. I think later this year there will be. And then the corporate in-house market, again, split between big and small. So in terms of like adoption, in terms of usage, in terms of order, I think the market is still growing. It's still forming shape. I made a comment a couple of weeks ago that the different Gen AI tools are starting to really form personalities. So they're finding homes among the different sectors of the market and different segments of the market. And I think India will benefit from that, as there will be a provider for that market, or there'll be several providers for that market. So a process of maturing still this year.
Got it. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this discussion with us today. And thank you so much to all the panelists, just starting with people in the order on my screen. Thank you so much, Horace. Thank you so much, Yasmin, Sumitra, Saurabh, Rohit, and Richard, who's dropped off. Thanks a lot, Dina, and to ILTA for doing this with India. And we'll definitely be seeing more events as we go forward in this year. Please be on the lookout for announcements. Thank you all. Have a great day ahead, or good night, or have a great evening ahead, depending on where you are in the world. So thank you so much, everyone, once again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for organizing
Thanks,
this.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.